Hey everybody, thank you so much for joining us and welcome to the Parenting Teens Summit Back to School version. I am so glad that you're with us today and you're joining us. I'm Kate and I'm currently a team member here at Axis.
Yeah, and I'm Josh. I'm also a team member here at Axis. We're so excited that you're joining us today. This is going to be a great interview with Brandon Cox. We're so excited to have you.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah.
Brandon, you are a pastor, you have a website, you're a publisher, you're an editor, you've done conferences, you've done speaking, different things, and you have even written a book, and your book is focused on social media. And I'm going to have you just tell a little bit about your book for the parents, the faith leaders that are watching this, and it's, revolving around social media. And then after you're done talking about that book a little bit, can you go right ahead and tell us how you define social media? Because parents, we know that our kids are always on social media, but what is social media?
Sure. Well, the book really goes into that. First section of the book is all about where in the world does social media come from?
Mm-hmm.
For me, the phrase social media is really, it's a modern phrase, but it's a very old concept.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really, in the book, go back to like the Garden of Eden, where God has this face-to-face conversational relationship with Adam and Eve, and how throughout history, we've moved away from face-to-face relationships with mass media, broadcasting over TV, radio, and then the internet, and how all the technologies we're seeing, Facebook, Snapchat, all the others, they're really just sort of going back to the roots of who human beings are, that we like to relate, we like to talk and converse. And so social media is just a fancy term for information conveyed between people through a relationship. And so the book is really about how the church can utilize that, how church leaders can utilize it, and how to stay up on it without getting absorbed by it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a messy conversation for a lot of reasons because there's so much that happens on social media and it's changing so rapidly. Yeah. So how involved do you think Christians should be with social media?
Well, I think that, if you look back in the last couple hundred years, it is a tool, it is an innovation that we have to be engaged with, just like we were engaged with radio, just like we were engaged with television. One of the oldest shows broadcast on TV is the Old Time Gospel Hour. So these are things that have been around a long time. And if you go way back to the New Testament era, you've got, the apostles using the Roman roads. They're using papyrus. They're using the technology of their times to convey the gospel. So I think Christians have to be engaged, have to be involved, but not so immersed that it affects our identity. And that's where, to me, I sort of begin to draw the line. If it starts to change my life in terms of creating a sense of narcissism or feeding into my sense of righteous indignation toward everything I don't like in the world, then I think we've gone a little too far and need to back off. So there's a balance. So.
Definitely. So it's kind of what you're going back to the garden. God told us that we are to create and to cultivate and to be stewards of what we have. So we can kind of look at social media as something that we have the ability to create, to steward, to cultivate. And as Christians, we should be able to do that properly. Now, teens might not have as great of like a filter understanding that this is a tool, that social media technology is a tool that we're responsible for and for using properly. So from your perspective, your wisdom, and for the parents and, the teachers and the faith leaders watching, do you have any practicals that we can give our students to help reinforce this idea that technology and social media, it's not good or bad, but it's how we use it? Is there any, how do we communicate? How do we set boundaries for them?
Yeah, I think first I'd have to clarify that social media, just like radio, TV, any other kind of technology, is not in and of itself good or bad, religious or non-religious, sacred or secular. It's just a thing. It's we breathe it, we process it, we live in it. Just like your kids plop down and watch a show on TV, they plop down and check Facebook or whatever. So it's just part of life. So I think when it comes to how much we allow our teenagers, particularly, to be involved in that part of life, every family is going to have to make a couple of difficult decisions and to talk through those decisions early so that it doesn't come up in a crisis moment. For example, with our daughter, she's 14. She goes to a Christian school. She's, bright, positive leader personality. And she uses social media. She's on Instagram. She's on a couple other things. She wants nothing to do with Facebook.
To parents, that is true. The teens are getting away from Facebook. So if you think I've got a Facebook, I know what they're doing. They're probably not on Facebook anymore.
Yeah. So when we got her a phone, or her first phone, we just sat down and explained, hey, we love you and we trust you. You have proven yourself responsible in so many ways. But you're not an adult yet. There's some judgment calls you may not be able to make. So you just need to know, and this was our family's direction. It may not be for every family, but for us, it was privacy is something that is a privilege granted. It's not a right. And so we reserve the right as parents anytime we want. We can pick up your phone and we can look at it. We can see things. Doesn't mean we're going to be running around investigating every little thing you've done, right, but we reserve that right. We always have permission. If you like that rule, you can have an account. And she goes, okay, I'll accept that because I want an account. And she got signed up. So for us, privacy is something that's sort of granted as it's earned. And that's the biggest thing for where we are. We also have kind of a standard of you don't follow strangers and you don't let strangers follow you. With this Instagram, it needs to be a protected account. She begged for about 1.5 years for Snapchat, and we just kept saying no. Eventually, what we did is we allowed her to download the app and befriend 2 people, a cousin and an aunt. And then me and her mom, of course, and she can use the filters, and that's about it. And again, we can check it anytime. So, yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating. So was there any pushback? Has there been any pushback? And if there is, how do you communicate to parents? How do you communicate to teens? Privacy is a privilege. How do we move beyond that? How do we set up these boundaries? How do we do that? Because I imagine that is not necessarily a normal conversation that's happening, where we're saying privacy is a privilege. So how do you communicate that well to your teen or to your whoever? It doesn't matter. How do you communicate that well?
Well, to me, there's the air coverage, the air war, and then there's the ground war. And the air war is, we are building a relationship of trust, a relationship of love. She knows that we trust her, that we think a lot of her, that we believe in the best about her. So she knows that in general. That's kind of the air coverage, so to speak. But then when those individual conversations come up, for us, they have to be saturated with loving language.
Warmth,
Yeah, this is not against you. It's not because we don't trust you. It's not because we think you're going to do something. It's because we love you. We want to protect you. We want the best for you. And really, it's because we're responsible for you. And I've told my daughter, someday I'm going to stand before God and he's going to say, how did you handle my daughter? How'd you protect her? And so I'm going to take that more seriously than her opinion. So.
Yeah, I like that. I love that you're, alluding to the preemptive conversations that you're having, because it is a tool, and just that you're sitting down and having this. I think that sometimes it's hard to have those conversations, but if it's done with warmth, it might be hard the first couple of times, but then they're going to be more willing to talk to you, like you said, about it, or understand the responsibility rather than yes, no, this is a line, that's a line. What do you think about, you've had these conversations now, parents have sat down with their sons and daughters, did it with warmth, had, explained the boundaries, explained the protection, all of that. What would you say that, okay, now they go too far, a boundary is broken, there's a break in the trust. Is there any wisdom that you can give for how we move through that then once that trust is broken? Or what do you explain what the consequences are going to be preemptively, or is it a case by case? Have anything on that thought?
Definitely. I think one thing you have to be careful with is making sure that you're not trying to sort of execute justice on behalf of your authority.
Mm.
Like, this is not just about them disobeying you or disrespecting you. This is about their development into adults. It's about their safety. And so I think when you have that conversation, it has to be about their heart. For example, if they look at something inappropriate and there's a record of that, I think sitting down and talking in an open way about, tell me what you saw and tell me what you understood from that and what that meant to you and how it made you feel, and having those kinds of conversations. In other words, don't just get mad, because getting mad just immediately creates distance and it puts up a wall. But if instead we sit down and lovingly say, hey, I'm concerned about the effect this is going to have on you, and how can we work through your feelings that you felt because of it. And then after that, it comes, now we're going to have to make some changes. Let's talk about what those changes are. And I think if we have first expressed concern and love, it softens when we go, we're going to have to take Snapchat off the phone for a while, and that kind of thing. So,
right. I love that you alluded to that. A lot of times when our students misuse their social media, misuse their technology, that it's not necessarily despite the parents or, despite the disciplinary. It's that there's a deeper heart issue, like you were talking about. Why were they drawn to maybe that inappropriate texting back and forth? Or because we see so much of social media, I think, especially in the realm that we're in, that a lot of time this is where our students are searching for their identity, because you said God created us to be relational. He did that intentionally, but they're seeking their identity not from necessarily healthy relationships face to face that are validating who they are in Christ, but rather what the social media. So how do we make parents more aware, faith leaders more aware of having that just identity even conversation, and expressing to our young people, hey, like, what you portray about yourself on social media isn't really who you are. What you're seeing about that person isn't really who they are. What are some great ways that we can affirm their identity face to face, especially in the home, so that they're not using their social media searching for identity?
Yeah, I think there are really several prongs that I would look at. One is in having an ongoing conversation about the problem of comparison. Just talking openly with them, hey, people today are suffering tremendous amounts of depression related to social media because they're taking their blooper reel of life and comparing it to everybody else's highlight reel. And that kind of comparison is dangerous for the heart. I think secondly is encouraging them to follow good role models on social media. There are some Christian musicians and various others that we point our daughter to, and we're just like, why don't you follow her? She, what she puts out is really amazing. You can see how she encourages people and has an influence, and sort of encouraging them not only to follow their friends, but to follow people that are good role models. And then another one that we sometimes forget about is sort of engaging with them. So with my daughter, for example, I'll sometimes send her just a little video instant message through Instagram, even though she can be in the next room, but it's sort of like, that's one of the ways she communicates. And I kind of want to be in that world.
That's good.
But I just kind of want to be involved in it. So.
Wow. So I love that third one of being in the conversation with them. And there are constant conversations that are happening on social media all over the place. So how do you encourage your daughter or a teen in general, how do you encourage them to be bold in their faith and be bold in the gospel on social media? Because there's a lot of flack that people are receiving now for being outspoken on their faith. So how do you communicate that? Like, be bold in that.
Yeah. Well, to me, you got to remember what we're teaching them about relationships and social media is that you can only go so deep in social media. And I often tell adults, there are some online relationships you probably should take offline and have coffee, because you're not friends yet. You're just connected. And then there's some offline relationships you probably should take online to stay in touch. So helping them understand that's not where the depth of our relationships come from. With that said, when it comes to witnessing, I think it's a matter of teaching the principle, who are you going to be able to win over? Well, it's going to be someone you have a closer relationship with.
Mm-hmm.
And so ranting and raving to strangers is not really a witness per se. It's just an argument. And so as we share our faith in general with the general watching public, I think it's a matter of keeping it positive, keeping it inspirational, and where the more confrontive type witnessing is going to happen is in the conversations that ensue. Maybe it's private messaging, maybe it's a smaller group within the network or whatever, but just sort of teaching them, be an encourager, share the light. Don't spend a lot of time, cursing the darkness to the general public. But when you see darkness rise up in a friend, lovingly confront them relationally, just like you would face to face.
Yeah, that's so good. I love that you too, just within that, are saying, hey, let's, promote or encourage, because they're getting a lot of that darkness, even if they're not trying. You said social media is a hotbed for relationships and people yearning for connection through their social media. And sometimes that doesn't come across very, very great. So let's set them up with make sure that that they're getting empowered and encouraged and resourced through their social media, just like they're going outward. As a pastor too, you're a pastor and an excellent one, I am sure. And so I'm sure that you're able to reach a lot of your congregation through, Facebook posts or, Instagram or what your church is posting. Do you see there being, moving kind of future casting now, that more faith leaders, more parents, more Christian teens are going to be needing to be more intentional about using their social media, though, however, to share the gospel, how that looks, because of just the way that, man, our world is just wanting to be connected through social media first and foremost, even though we know, healthy relationships are face to face. But do you see that shift? Do you see us needing to be more proactive on our social media with that?
I do. I absolutely do. In fact, we planted our church 5 years ago with one other family. And since then have grown, maybe 400 or so come now, but almost all of them have come as a result of social media. It may have been word of mouth, but the person that invited them found out about us on Facebook. A ton of people, that's where they learned about us. And when it comes to using social media as a church family, to me, it's a matter of there are more people sharing their faith than ever before. And I think 20 years ago, before there was social media, a lot of our preaching was kind of a guilt trip about you ought to be sharing your faith more. But now I think we get to say, hey, you've got a great natural relational channel for this. And the church gets the chance to go, here's a message. Here's a graphic. Look at what we're sharing. One of the things we do, for example, is we share a lot of articles from, Relevant Magazine and others that are sort of helpful for singles or young marrieds or whoever it is. And we just encourage our people, why don't you just share that helpful stuff with your friends? It doesn't all have to be promotional about the church and that kind of thing. So I think it's going to get bigger and bigger. And I think, we went from you found a church through the yellow pages to you found it in Google, but now I think you find it on Facebook. So it's going to get bigger.
Yeah, I mean, that's how I found the church that I'm going to here in Colorado, is via Facebook. I just did Facebook searches of churches and picked one. And so I totally understand that. And I think that's why it's so important that we have these articles and these ways to encourage our friends on these social media platforms. But does that impact what we talk about? Does that impact how we talk about certain things? Because I can pull up what's trending right now and it's going to be very dark and very depressing. So how do we encourage in a way that is very impactful for our audience, whether that's through shares or whatever? How do we do that well?
Yeah. Well, one of my models I look at is my old pastor, still considering my pastor, Rick Warren, looking at how he uses Facebook and Twitter. And when things blow up in trending stories, you never see them jump into the mix, because if we're not careful, we can win some arguments and lose some friends. There's so much of that to me, it all goes back to relationships, that we should be able to disagree about certain things and still remain friends. So I think that's big. Now, it's okay to speak out on issues of justice, on issues of poverty, oppression, those kinds of things. There's definitely space for us to be speaking into those issues. But to me, it's not. I would say it this way: social media sometimes encourages us to have a strong position, but what matters way more than our position is our posture.
That's
so
good.
The first question is my posture right before I share this position? And can I keep some friends after it's over? So
yeah. So how can a parent teach their teen that? How can a parent communicate that posture matters more than position?
Yeah. Part of it is modeling. Something I see a lot is teenagers who they have a negative perception of the world, and in all honesty, that they're hearing it. They hear it at the dinner table. They hear this sort of doom and gloom talk, and that, to me, spiritually translates into one who engages the world in that way. So a lot of times it's a matter of deciding, on top of the gospel, I'm also going to model compassion and encouragement and, good, positive things in my communication. So
I love that posture, and that's so good, because I think that is something, that's a conversation going back to earlier in our interview, just talking about how important having these conversations and modeling and talking about it, because like you're saying, kind of, it's about what's in the heart, right? So why are you projecting that on this platform right now? What is your motive, your purpose, and your posture behind what you're posting and sharing on social media? And I love that, just kind of wrap things up, the conclusion kind of being, is that, hey, social media is a great tool that we can use, that we can cultivate for connection and conversation, but it's not replacing the face-to-face, the genuine, what comes when God created us to be with people. So just expressing over and over to our teens that, you can use social media to connect and talk to people, but not at the expense of also having genuine human relationships. So if there was one more nugget of wisdom that you can share with the masses here watching this today, just with the parenting and just even the discipling of our young people today and their engagement and time spent on social media, what would that be? And then also, we want to provide parents and faith leaders and teachers across the nation a link from you to help resource them. So what would that link be?
Yeah, I would just remember these 3 M words. Ongoing in our conversation, our teaching, and how we handle social media. I want my kids to always be learning about how to be mature, how to minister, and how to be on mission. So just teaching them with social media or church or anywhere else, how can I grow in my faith, be mature? How can I serve people and develop a servant's heart? And sometimes that's families serving together at a local place and sort of helping them out with social media or whatever. And then, am I living on mission? So those 3 M's, to me, should just sort of frame a lot of our conversations as kids, or as parents of kids.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And in terms of follow-up, I mean, for me, I sort of have this hub of BrandonAcox.com, and from there link out to all kinds of stuff, books and resources.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, parents and faith leaders, teachers, pastors who are watching this, make sure to check out Brandon Cox's website. And I know that you can see his book on social media off of that. And it has been great to talk to you. So thanks, Brandon.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
have a great rest of your day. And parents, thanks for joining in. And we'll be back next time with another one. Thanks so much.